Can we dim the lights somewhere?
Look up. I am in that little tower there. Artists like me were invited to spend some time in that room on the roof. You've probably never been in before. As you can see, the furnishings are sparse. There is a bed, an espresso machine. He who waits is always late. I draw faces with double eyes, heads upon heads, hands in hands, figures I always draw when I don't know what I want to make. But it frustrates me, because my memories aren't all that clear. I can't get the lines together. If you turn your head to the left, you see the Dome Square. Today, it's mainly a meeting place for people who don't have any specific goal. I woke up before the tram started to ride. It is officially my last day here. I understand the whole premium experience much better. It's time to go home.
Alright. Well, I didn't give away everything, but that's pretty much the basis of your person sitting in this room, and all these things happen. But the really difficult part for me was how to create a story, but also how to bring the people to have the people experience the story that you have in mind. I mean, you don't want errors in the image. You don't want buttons that people have to push. You don't. I mean, the last thing I wanted was some sort of like game experience. So that was really difficult to look for. And this is a book that I start many lectures with because the title is so brilliant. But I have to admit I never read the book. But the fact, it's all about storytelling. And that's something that I want to elaborate a little bit on. Storytelling is very old. I mean, we read stories in mugs of coffee, leaves of tea, and also in our hands, for example. And this is a project where I visited many fortune tellers, and I all asked them to read my hands. And they all gave these stories. And the beautiful thing is, although everybody knows it's really nonsense, also everybody sort of like triggers into it. Like when I had this hanging in an exhibition, people looked at their own hands to see what was with them, you know. So it's much more a mirror. But it's also interesting for me to see how well we are able to produce stories, how easy it is for us to put elements together and to turn them into a story. For example, this is a room that I visited in a budget hotel in Amsterdam, and I went there right after the people left. So this was like a Sunday morning. It's right here, just before the checkout time. And I looked for the room with the most trash. Well, the first thing I noticed was, of course, this. This is a sock that was hung on the fire alarm, so they could smoke. But the room is also created for this kind of thing. For example, you see the room numbers, like here, are mirrored on the window, so the people can from outside see which room makes a havoc or where things are happening. But I also found a lot of things like empty mushroom boxes, empty bottles, of course. But I also found on the back of school papers the booking summary of the people that came there. So I was able to sort of like reconstruct their whole trip. And then you realize that it's been a really hard trip, that too. So what they bought like a set of handcuffs. They smoked in bed. They brought a lot of mushrooms. And the typical thing with this is that a story which goes by with people who live on the street in Amsterdam, that they often go to the trash cans near Schiphol Airport, because people buy too many drugs and they trash it in the trash cans there, so they take it out again. Yeah. And the trash can was very beautifully almost empty, so I thought, the trash can really needs a user. So this is a way, I think, you could describe it as a detective, like a Sherlock Holmes. He just picks up the facts and we constructing a story. And what really works with me for these drawings that the setting is always clear, that it's always one space or one big room. So there's very little to explain. So you just have to bring up the facts, and people can fill in the gaps themselves and create a story. Yeah. Well, maybe Sarah, you want to say something about this?
Oh yeah. This is an old picture from 1900, and there was this filmmaker. So I always tell when we talk about virtual reality that there's this gigantic hype around virtual reality, and then I say, well, you have to look at this picture. It was already around in the 1900s, right? So this is a Frenchman, and what he did, he actually created a 360 experience of the descent of a balloon, like an air balloon, like how do you say that?
Yeah.
So there are like multiple projections, and the audience could actually see this descent through those multiple projections. But this installation in Paris was only on for a couple of days because it was too dangerous because of all the heat of all the projectors. There was like a fire hazard, so they had to quit the installation. But that kind of puts it back into perspective that 360 is not that new, it's a kind of old form of exploring stories or telling stories.
Yeah, and I think it's always like we're always looking for the real thing. Like cinema was like the real thing, and now VR is the real thing. So I think it will be endless for us to look for things that represent our reality in a realistic way, or in a way that you really experience it. So I was very clueless about VR, and I knew how to make drawings. I had a big wish to be able to walk through a drawing of myself, but I had no clue how to build it. So therefore, Sarah and we were in contact with another partner, which is Zesbaans, and they were the developers. And I went to them and I said, well, what do you need? And then I made a piece of paper, this paper, and I said, well, there it is. This is everything you need. You have the structure of wood, we have the light bulbs, some lines you can extend or not. And I was in...
It was very naive, like it was very funny. So we had this whole meeting, and then in the end of the meeting, Jan thought, okay, now I know what to do. So he made this kind of... So with all those lines, you can actually remake my drawings, right? So in a three-dimensional
like
way. Which of course didn't work like that, but that was,
Yeah, that's a shame. I wish it worked. Nice try. Yeah, but what we found out was how to create a room. Like the first idea was to create this whole shopping mall. Like I've said, oh yeah, the stairways are so beautiful, and then we opened the elevators, and it got really big. And in the end, we said no, we have to bring it back to the place where it's about. Already 5 minutes. So we recreated the room. I took some pictures. This is viewpoint 1. So once you're in the VR, you move from 4 different perspectives, and sometimes you move back, so you're not able to walk around, but it does give you a sense of place. And the fact is that you move 5 times around in a very small space, so you get to see the same space all the time from different perspectives. So here you see this is the actual room on the roof, and this is the window. Well, this is this window.
and because it's so high up, you get really a view of the city of Amsterdam, which is really interesting because you're really on a high spot in the city.
So you see different. Here you see, for example, that the desk is drawn different from every perspective. Is drawn again.
So instead of like the lines, the image that Jan created in the beginning, of course, didn't work. So we had to kind of model all the different objects in the room and then kind of think. So from the perspective of the viewer, so when you have the glasses on, you would only see one angle of the table. So Jan had to draw this table from the 3 or 4 different perspectives, and then map the texture of the drawing on top of that.
So this is the same table. So it's always different tables. And what we tried first when you make a 3D model of it, which is very difficult because we only work with lines, but it also looked very, very generic. It looked very computer game-ish. And I really wanted to have some sort of like crisp lines and have a different feel to it. So I wanted to be really close to the drawings. Yeah, and one thing maybe also that we decided upon for storytelling was to have a voiceover. So you're inside somebody's head, and the voice is telling you what he's feeling, which is like an inner monologue, you could say. But we were also able to give with this voice a lot of attention, because for example he says, "Oh look, outside there is a man on the square," and although you hear it, it's almost like you go automatically like this. Another thing was the birds that we introduced, because we needed something to follow, also to look around. We saw it with the presentation of Aleppo and Build, that the women who was looking in the VR for the first time, she was like sort of like static, you know. So you also have to really pull their head around in a way, without having the arrows in the image. Well, this is already the last slide, but I have one more slide, and that's when I want to come back to the part of storytelling, and that's also, I think this is very important. That it's very important to not be, that you don't have to say everything. There's a lot of space for people to fill in themselves, and that's, I think, when you look back to good storytelling or very good writing, it's very often about giving very minimal sensories in a way, but creating a lot of space. And therefore, for me, also this project was really nice because people could read it on many different levels, which is, I think, great. You want to say something else? No?
Fine.
Okay.
We still have time
Oh,
for
yeah,
some questions.
questions, yeah.
So if any of you have questions for Jan and Sarah.
Yeah?
Here, just one question. The book that you showed at the beginning, which one is it again? Sorry?
The book?
The book that you showed.
Oh,
Sorry, because we
it's called, we go there again. It's
always there with it.
I tried to read it actually, but it's really about people who are heavy traumatized, and how we can deal with trauma in a way of creating stories that we can live with. So it's very on a psychological level, but I think it works on. I mean, I have small children, and they already are building their own stories about themselves. So I think that's why I like the book. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Alex.
I was just wondering, because I'm like, it's an interior story.
Yeah.
Like you're inside an interior, but you're also inside a mind. And I was just wondering if you're, I mean, like, because your style is so, like, I think it's extraordinary. And I'm just wondering if you've got plans to do any exteriors, and how you might sort of foresee actually mapping other areas, not interior spaces, but actually exteriors.
Yeah, like a city, for example.
Yeah, because I'm curious, because obviously,
Yeah.
like, Aleppo is.
No,
walking around,
I
it's
would
not
love
interior.
that, and I think what we did with the refugee camp was a very rough way of doing it, and I can imagine, or your piece, that it's really great if you have a place where you can actually wander through and move through. So I would love to do that.
Do you have any areas you'd like to go?
Many places actually. I'm now working on a drawing for the newspaper that I'm working on, where it's a big law case. So it's the courtroom where what we know from the newspaper. But I think it would be very nice if you can walk through this kind of space. Or
Any other questions to Jan or Sarah? I actually have a question to Sarah. How was your perspective on working on it? Was it something different that you did before, or just like because it's drawing? Normally you do like more documentary footage or animation, and here it seems it's something different. And I'm wondering if it is really different, or is it just for you another type of just project you need to deal with, and that's it? Like,
Yeah,
was it a challenge?
Yeah, it was a challenge. I mean, it was a challenge for all three of us. So like Zesbaans, Jan, and me, because we never did VR before, so we had to kind of learn by doing. But for me, I mean, in essence, it doesn't really matter how it's made, or if it's animation or drawings or photography or like choose, I think, the story is the most important, and then like you just try to find the best way how to tell the stories, whether it's drawing or an animation or a linear radio documentary or a stop motion animation, whatever. That's or messaging. Just
Yeah, and I think
You would
Sarah
have-
really brought in a lot of things that I didn't have knowledge of, and so it was for me also. I really needed you also to rethink, and for me, like I'm almost mode drawing and said, oh, that's it. But you said no, it should have some sort of like storyline. It should be like a little movie.
yeah.
Did it take long to develop the final way it's done, or?
Yeah, well, we started with this kind of elaborate story of like some kind of chase within this within this story. You had to go up escalators and like this kind of elaborate thing, and then we ended up so no, that's far too big, and like in the end we made it in 4 months.
Yeah, something like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's always like this when you start, and you just have all these ideas.
Yeah.
and you
Yeah,
know,
so we
and
were
you-
like every time we kind of like make it like we
Smaller, smaller. Yeah.
So one
And I was-
person, one
yeah.
room.
And
That's
still,
it.
I was very afraid that it was too boring.
Yeah.
That it's just, is it not boring? It's not really not boring, So that was always the challenge.
Yeah.
And what's the reception of the project? Oh, we have questions, so maybe we will. Yeah,
Sure.
would you just say in few words the reception of the project, like how people react on it, and then we have 2 more questions from the audience.
Do you want to say how we
Yeah.
won a really big prize with it?
So I guess that was well received.
Yeah, and the really great thing is that it's on view permanently in the store itself. So the store was very happy with it, so they built an installation so people can actually go and see it while they go shopping.
So
And
there's this art installation in this.
yeah, so I think it's one of the first permanent VR installations in Holland.
Yeah. And I still have a problem with VR that it's like, you discussed it as well, like now we have those clunky machines, you need like all those boxes and cables and things, and like you can only see it when you have all this great machines, and so in terms of accessibility it's like difficult, I think, but like that's just a matter of a few years, and then it's just
Yeah.
it will be on our mobile phones.
Okay, I don't know who of you was
Below
the
her
first.
one and somebody in the
No,
front.
but there was Philo, and I don't know your name.
Jacob,
Jacob.
Okay.
well, I was wondering if you draw all the illustrations on paper and then they were scanned, or did you draw them in vector files initially?
Yeah, no, everything is ink and paper, so I really wanted to also, it was because I wanted to have this line feeling, which is sort of like scruffy, and some of the objects I made a drawing of it, and then they were taken apart to give some depth feeling, and I tried to do maybe some touching up lines with the googles on, yeah, but that was really difficult, because then you're like, that was...
Philo?
Two questions about the process. So first of all, you mentioned that you were afraid that it might be too boring. So I was wondering, what did you do to find that out? Did you do a lot of testing? That's my first question. And my second question is, you mentioned that you were collaborating with a team of developers or a company. How did that come about, and especially like how was the collaboration?
Shall I say the first?
Yeah. What was it again?
What was the first question again? I
About
thought-
testing. How did
Testing.
you test
Yeah, we
whether
had
it
it.
was
We had it
boring?
tested. We had a few people that came in at a certain stage and said, well, they didn't know anything about it, and they looked at it. And there's also people who've seen quite a lot of VR. So I also felt, but also people who never seen VR. So, and in the film you see not only this part, but there's also like a part where everything sort of like goes like this. Like I felt almost like I had to do this kind of scene as well. But so that's it. And
Yeah.
about the collaboration.
I've already worked together with Submarine, so I knew and I know Jules and Harm, they're like really good guys. So and they never worked, but they worked in Unity. So I thought, okay, they can do that. So and they were very open to work with that. In terms of the complexity of the story, the boringness, I think what we have to take in mind. I mean, this was produced like 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
I mean, we kept in mind that a lot of people that have never experienced VR before, so we are still in the process of learning to be a viewer, like a VR experiencer, you know? It's like, you know, when you first went to the cinema, like the half of the audience walked out because the string was coming in. So this is kind of, we kept that in mind as well, you know, like there's so much already it's already an overwhelming experience by itself just to be in this three-dimensional 360 environment. So there's actually, we kind of thought of interactivity and then we kind of skipped it because there was already enough.
And this, what you were looking at now, which is the last thing, we made some sketches of possibilities of movement. And in the beginning I was like, oh, we're going to rotate a room and it's going to be like this and this. But we also noticed that people get nauseous so quickly, so that's something you really want to avoid.
Yeah, I want to ask if the narrative is linear, the voiceover narrative, but it's just one narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long is it?
11 minutes.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No?
And Anja, you mentioned somebody had a question.
No, I think Renata was somebody.
No, Eva.
Okay.
Excuse me, guys.
I wanted to know how you approach text in your work. I mean, especially in the Refugee Republic, there was so much more text. Is it somehow stuff that you write while you're experiencing it, diary style, and then reducing it down, or how do you?
Yeah, writing is I think the hardest part, and the part that is, I think my drawings are more about text than about the drawing. So for example, when I visit the place, I type everything out, I edit it, I rewrite it, and also the voiceover took me a long time to find the right tone of voice and to have it properly. So text is it's very often it's text driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like it how it's working together. It's quite unusual.
We have time for one more question. Anyone else? Yes.
I would like to know how you collaborate in terms of roles. I mean, do you have someone like art direction and what is your role?
Yeah. This is I find always very difficult because although I know very well what I like, but I'm not on forehand. So it's also very important that everybody who works on the project has a lot of freedom to experiment. With this project, we decided that we were both director, so that would give, yeah.
It's kind of, it's not a really like there was not so much hierarchy. So what we actually, so we worked both on the story. I mean, it's Jan's drawings, right? So, but he asked me because of my the way how I approach interactive storytelling and my experience on that, and how to go about the story itself and how to experience that, and then also I'm very used to deal with technical part, so like to kind of be a translator. So that was my role, and then there were the technical party who also have the credits of, you know, for them it was also very important to have decision making. So even there, in terms of animation or modeling or like even adjusting, like maybe the scene is too long, we all kind of, it was no one who said no.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like in movie sets, you have very little time. There's a lot of money at stake, so you need one director to really use that time on this moment. But this, although we had a time limit and a deadline, there was no need to have this sort of like format.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.